And we are up and running. We are on air. This is a hangout, and we're going to hang out. So make sure there are no children in the room. And we'll be having a discussion with Charlie and Barret and myself about how we collided, how we came into our awakening with A Course in Miracles. And of course, that's always an interesting dialogue, because I find that there are a lot of synchronistic events that lead us up to A Course in Miracles. And so I think we're going to have some fun today. There's a little bit of a departure from our usual dialogue about the Course, and we hope you enjoy this episode. So we'll start off with good morning to Charlie and good morning to Barret.
Good morning. It's really good to be here. Always good to connect with you guys.
It does. Thank you so much for having me back.
Absolutely. I'm going to have to do another piece of cover art for our series here and include you in the write-up on it. But anyway, it is a beautiful day here in Chicago. We're moving toward the 40s today and the 50s tomorrow after 3 weeks of hideous cold. So life is getting better and better.
Yeah, it's all part of my plan to not have to shovel my sidewalk. So it snowed about an inch here 2 days ago, and I just wasn't in the mood. Usually I'm really excited about getting out there and shoveling the sidewalk, and for whatever reason, this week came and I was like, yeah, it's going to be in the 40s in a couple days. it'll melt off.
Yeah, I don't need the mailman to deliver the mail for a day or two anyway. So.
He's got boots on. He'll be fine.
It's interesting because, again, like the Course points out to us, this world is very, very devious. It's, a world we have created from our imaginations about life. And if you shovel your sidewalk after a major snowfall and somebody's walking along and they fall down, you are liable because you altered the natural order of things. So a lot of people, when it gets snowy around here, a lot of people don't shovel their sidewalks simply because that eliminates the possibility of being sued if somebody in fact does fall down, in front of your house. And that just shows you what the lawyers in this world have created for us.
Is that like they have Good Samaritan laws? Is that like Bad Samaritan law?
I think that probably is the ultimate Bad Samaritan law. But and it used to be much more a part of life in throughout Chicago in business areas. A lot of businesses would refuse to do anything to their sidewalks, so you'd have to slog through and kind of fight your way in order to throw money at them for some product or service that you needed.
I love it. It's like it's a story of, let me give you some convoluted thinking to take care of your convoluted thinking.
It's one of the things I find very interesting is that all of the Star Trek series gives us a lot of insights that are really very much based on a lot of ideas from A Course in Miracles. Not that anybody there was reading the Course, but I find it fascinating how these things show up. And Deep Space Nine was a series where they had the Ferengi. We were able to meet this alien race called the Ferengi, who were the ultimate hedonists. Their god was money, and corruption was exalted as being a refined and highly evolved part of your personality. So I find it interesting that as we're moving into 2018, it seems like the Republican Party has fully embraced the Ferengi philosophy. And it just seems to be getting better and better as we're watching this drama unfold around us.
I didn't even know they were into Deep Space Nine, but apparently they are. So.
Yeah, again, that's synchronicity. Sometimes a thought seeded into the collective consciousness just rises and takes command.
Yeah, we have an exalted one too, huh?
Oh yes.
Who shall not be questioned, right? Yeah.
But
well, I think all these things are interesting, and they're perfect dynamics of sort of the ups and downs. And I think our intention today to share our stories a bit, it really fits beautifully into this, because I think in addition to sort of the societal level ups and downs, we have all the personal ups and downs too. And again, the kind of common theme from the world's perspective is that we're at the effect of these things that happen. And I know that that's kind of a part of how I came into the course, as I was studying other spiritual paths, and I was learning about things like the law of attraction, and learning about channeling, and learning about energy healing. And they all seem to have some truth, because they were helping me to kind of uncover layers within me, and find old wounds that I could start healing and releasing. So I knew that there was validity there, but I also felt like everything seemed like it wasn't the whole story, right? There was always some struggle, like that it didn't have the whole picture. So yeah, actually my story of how I came to the course was kind of a cool story, because I'd heard quotes from the course over the years. Different books that I would read would quote a line or a few sentences from the course. So, but I had no idea what it was. I would see the sentence, and it would be tagged A Course in Miracles. Oh, okay. Well, apparently that's something. And it was always something uplifting and kind and loving. So I was like, okay, that's good. There used to be a spiritual bookstore here in Chicago called Transitions Bookstore. And I'd gone to some events there, and I'd occasionally get a book or two there. So I was on their mailing list. And this was 2006 when they were having financial trouble, and they put an email out to their whole list saying, "Hey, we need some real help if we're going to keep our doors open. We've got some serious financial problems, and yeah, unless we sell a lot more, we're not going to be able to stay open." So I went down to the bookstore to kind of do my part, and I bought like 9 books or 10 books or something like that. I just filled up a basket full of them. And one of the ones that ended up in my cart was A Course in Miracles. So I started to try to read it when I got home, and I would get a page or so in, and I would just fall asleep. And so this just kept happening, where I'd read another page and I'd fall asleep in it. And I don't know, I got to page 13 or something after a weekish, maybe 2 weeks of doing this, and I'm like, I cannot do this. I can't read a book like this. But I'd also gotten the card deck for the workbook lessons. So I decided, well, I'm going to do the workbook, because that's 1 lesson a day. I think I can handle this. And the structure was clear enough that it was useful. So I started going through the workbook, and I could stay awake for that half a page or whatever each workbook lesson was in the beginning. And I stuck with it. Pretty much every day I was doing the workbook lesson. I was still kind of doing my other things. And then I was at a Barnes and Noble, and I sometimes kind of would get intuitive nudges, and I got this nudge I should get this book that was sitting on a display. And so I picked up the book called Disappearance of the Universe. And I kind of read the cover, but it doesn't say A Course in Miracles anywhere on the front, so I didn't even really know it was about the course, but I just knew I was supposed to get it. I was like, okay. And then I started reading it, and I started to realize, oh yeah, this is helping me to understand the course. And at that point, I really knew that I had found my path, that I didn't need to keep looking anymore, because I tried all these different things and different teachings, and they had something, but the course was the most complete thought system I'd ever found. And with the explanation of Art and Persa and Gary's books to help me understand exactly what it was saying, I just really felt very, very clicked in. And I basically started a course study group without having even finished the workbook, without having read much of the text at all. I just started a study group so I could start connecting with other people about it. And yeah, that was 2007, and I've just kind of been going ever since.
That's a perfect way to be introduced to the course, is to have it filter its way up into your awareness, so that you really don't have a lot of preconceptions about what you're going to experience with it. You just kind of, boom, have that direct impact.
Yeah, and I'm really glad we're kind of having this as a topic for today, because I love how everyone's story with it is perfect for them. You know, I mean, sometimes you do hear stories of the course like literally falling off a book and hitting them in the head, like things like that, where it's like Spirit is really guiding us. And I know other people have had some of the journey, similar dynamics that I did, where they studied other things first. And I think it was just right the way it happened for me. I think if I had gotten exposed to the course even 5 years earlier in my life, I don't know if I would have been ready for a lot of the concepts that it shares. But I was ready when it came to me in 2006, and then I think that ever since then it's just been like, okay, peeling back more and more layers of the onion, as everyone talks about how the course is holographic. It's like it just kind of keeps sinking deeper and deeper into the teaching. And, or maybe a different way to say it is, we keep expanding to more closely match the magnificence of the teaching and know the fullness of what it's saying. So I think that's an ongoing journey to achieve that.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It's a journey of unraveling illusions about who you are. So hence the analogy of the onion. You know, I thought I was this and I thought I was that, and every layer that we strip off allows us to get a little bit of an insight as to what we really are, as opposed to who we think we are. So it's a vast chasm between those two pivotal points in identity, as being a me or as being a what. And being a what, of course, leaves us without any boundaries at all. It allows us to step into a place of such magnitude that it's not even conceivable to the me that we thought we were.
Yeah. Bye, little me.
There you
go. Thank you, Barret.
Yeah, you bet.
So, Charlie, how did you have that first awakening experience with A Course in Miracles?
Well, mine came along in 2009, and I got involved with a teacher, a spiritual teacher back in the early 70s, a guru from India. And the guru gifted me and his other devotees with what he referred to as knowledge. And it was an internal experience that we can connect to. And so there was a meditation involved with that. And I practiced that religiously, so to speak, for a couple of years. And I moved back to Chicago in 1975, and I started to drink again, and spent the next 8 years ignoring the guru and consuming lots of beer. And I dropped this whole concept of this spiritual path that I'd been on, that I'd been seeking. And I had been studying back in the 70s, studying, looking at reincarnation and just waking up to all these different concepts and the ones I'd been raised with in the Christian background that I came from. So in the early 80s, I found out about AA, and I got into AA and stopped drinking. Little did I know it was a spiritual-based program when I got into it. And so all of a sudden, I'm back into this realm of having conversations about spirituality rather than just football and business. And so there was another launching pad here for me to get back on the path and to start pursuing things again. And I I found different teachers. I found different books. I found different things I was interested in. I pursued a little bit of this, a little of that, a little of this, and came around to the early 2000s, turn of the century, right? And I had switched careers. I'd closed my business down. I'd started into a second career as a financial planner, and I was working, trying to find new clients, type of thing, all the time. And I met a woman at a Starbucks because we were in line the same time every morning. I started saying hi to each other and started just kind of chit-chatting a little bit. And I thought, well, this is, I knew the family names, so I thought this would be a good prospect for my client list. So I started to get to know her a little bit better. But the conversations always turned into more spirituality conversations than they ever did about financial planning. So about the same time, I was introduced to the Four Agreements. I was introduced to Eckhart Tolle. They all came along that summer of 2009 when I realized my business, my financial planning business, was not going to make it. I wasn't that successful in it. So I knew at the end of the year I was gonna get out of this business. I had no clue what was next, but I was open to things appearing. And Chris, you first mentioned in the introduction here about the synchronicity of things. And I realize now this synchronicity was just taking place because it was one thing after another. One conversation with somebody else, being directed to go find out about this healer, being directed to get this newsletter, that website, talk to this person. There's one thing after another. The books that came in at the same time, Tolle and the Four Agreements, and all this stuff was happening, just one thing after another, until the fall of that year. So it's the fall of 2009, and I met this woman at the Starbucks one day to have our conversation, and meeting ended, and I got up and I left, went to my car. My car wouldn't start. So my friend offered to give me a ride to my office. And as I opened her passenger door, on her seat was a CD from Marianne Williamson. Now, I'd heard of Marianne. I knew of the course. I'd heard the title, kind of like what Barret was saying. I'd heard the title of the course, but I didn't know really what it was. But when I saw that CD on her seat, and I looked across, to her in the driver's seat, recognizing the only reason we're together is to talk about spirituality. It's got nothing to do with this financial planning business, So we started to have more and more in-depth conversations about spirituality, and I was just sharing with her my road trip, what I'd been through, what I've been going through, what I've been learning. And we met one morning, and she walked in, and she brought this actual physical copy, which is now falling apart, of the course, and plopped it down on the table. And she said, I bought 2 copies of this when I bought my copy, and I never knew who the second one was for. It was for you. And she gave it to me. And this was around Thanksgiving time, end of 2009. I was going away that weekend to a weekend-long retreat to learn a healing technique that I practice. And I took the course with me. And sort of like Barret, what I was doing was I was just in the downtime back at the hotel room. I would open the book up and just read a paragraph or 2, or maybe a section, and then say to myself, nobody here wrote this. This was not written by anybody that I had any awareness of on this plane, so to speak. It was just so. It touched me so deeply. It impacted me so greatly. And so that was that weekend. And then, Christmas rolled around, the holidays, I put the book down, nothing really happened. Beginning of 2010, once the new year was over, and I had resigned from my position, I had free time on my hands, I sat down, and as Barrett's heard this story many times, I sat down for about 6 months. And I'd say, Barret, too, the first beginning of it there was a lot of nodding off. When you mentioned that this morning, there was a lot of times where I was sitting in the chair, and after, I'd be waking up 30 minutes later going, wait a minute, what happened? I only read a paragraph. So I studied it for about 6 months pretty intently. But during that period, Gary Renard, author of The Disappearance of the Universe, I've got a flyer about him coming to the Infinity Center up in Highland Park, Illinois, north of Chicago. And in the bio, it said this guy had 17 years experience with the Course in Miracles. And I went, oh, I got to go hear this guy, because, I'm struggling through this 600 pages. I can read a paragraph a day or get through a little section, or I have to back up and read again what I read yesterday because I can't remember it. And so I went to hear him, and that's when I was introduced to Disappearance of the Universe. And then the combination of the two, of course, like you said, Barret, it was such a supplement. It was such a beautiful supplement to add to the process of learning this thing, trying to understand it, trying to absorb it. Like both of you guys were talking about, kind of the sinking in, as Barret mentioned, expanding into. I thought that was a really great way to express that, because that's really what was going on. The more time I spent with it, the more expansive the view became, the more expansive the awareness became, the more expansive the connection became, and I was able to, through so much of this time, take what my guru had shown me, right, and take what I'd garnered out of my years in AA, and now the Course. And these three things just came together perfectly. That was my synchronicity. I could be sitting and reading the Course and read a sentence and going, oh, that's step number so-and-so. It's just what they were talking about there. Or I could be reading a sentence and saying, that's just what my guru says, And I had that over and over and over again. And still to this day, as I work with the Course today on a daily basis, the same thing will happen. The synchronicity and the tying of it all together, because truth is the truth. It doesn't matter whether it's coming from this little blue book, or it's coming from the big blue book, right? Or it's coming from a spiritual teacher of some sort, or an author, somebody that's had that moment of clarity and gets to express it in words. And so I just continue with it. I love it. I thrive on it. I can't wait when I get up in the morning to get my time with the Course. And I love the groups that we have going, and every bit of it. This Thursday morning thing is a delight. I'm just so enjoying doing this with you guys. So, but that was my intro, and that's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
Yeah, and I definitely can relate to that idea that you shared, that when you start reading the Course, you really come to that understanding that this was not written by mortals. This was not written by the egos that are bouncing around in the world. Just the chemistry of the people who came together that afforded the opportunity for this information to be brought into this realm was miraculous unto itself.
Yeah.
But after you read, the first 10 pages, if you set the book down thinking, oh, this is, somebody's fantasy, then you really are not ready for the Course. There is a sense of wonderment about the Course. And when you start into working with the Course in Miracles, if you don't have that sense of wonderment,
yeah,
it's definitely going to be a challenge for you, because the first thing you have to do is recognize that this is not an earthly phenomenon. This is not from this realm.
Yeah, I'm reminded of the hotel room in New York when I first had the book with me, and I was just randomly popping it open and reading a paragraph, and that's exactly what would happen. I would read the paragraph and go, wow, but walk around the room, just pacing back and forth going, oh my God, I can't believe this, It really was. It was absolute wonderment, and it continues to this day, just in relationships and conversations, and when the kind of the clouds part for a minute, and you go, oh my Lord, this is unbelievable. It continues. The wonderment continues. I was just reading this morning on joy, how again, it seems to be a theme that keeps hitting me upside the head, about being, there's so much joy in this wonderment. It is the miracle.
That's awesome. That's really beautiful. Yeah, I love your story, Charlie. It's, you know, it's just so cool to see how sort of like all paths lead to heaven, right? And even the course just being one of the streams that leads us back to our awareness of the oneness, but sort of like all of our individual streams joining the stream of the course as we come back to that awakening. And there is an immensity, there is a grandeur, you know, to use that word, about this experience. And it just keeps coming back to me, hearing Ken Wapnick talk about how we often want to bring the largeness, the beauty, the you know, the epic nature of the course down to our size. But what instead we should do is we should strive to let ourselves become that epicness, become that grandeur, become that immensity, because that's really what the course is asking of us.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yes, it is a source of amazement, and and yet you also have that feeling that I've always, this is truth. I've always known this to be truth.
Yeah.
And that's what I like about the course, is that you don't have to convince yourself. As you're reading it, it unveils itself to be the truth that you always knew.
Right.
It reminds me of a course teacher who, when people were struggling with it or struggling with some of the concepts, he would say, you know, you're the one that wrote this. You know, basically to help us to see that right mind that is the source of the light and the love that comes through in the form of Jesus as the author of the course. That right mind is in you. And he was just kind of helping us to break away our disidentification from that. And it was kind of shocking to hear someone say, "Oh, I didn't write the course," you know. But his point was that oneness that we all are, that's where the message behind the course comes from, and that's ultimately what we're all going to come to be in touch with. So, yeah. So I'd love to hear, Chris, a little bit more about your story too.
Well, mine started, 71 years ago, but we'll condense it down to the more immediate events. But in 1994, I came out for my kid's wedding, and I relocated because they had wanted me to. Both of them had kids at the time. Eric had Kevin by a previous marriage, and Lynn had Christopher by a previous marriage. So for about the last 18 years, I'd been making my living as a watercolor artist, and I would travel and wholesale my work all over the country. And so relocating from California to Illinois was not really a big deal, but it would afford me the luxury of being able to, you know, have my own little studio there in the Chicago region, and pursue my artwork, and at the same time take care of the family. You know, I could be there during the day for the two little guys when they'd come in from school and things of that sort. So I was doing a little bit of parenting and a little bit of painting, and I hit a point in about mid or late 95 where the painting just stopped. And that was really kind of an unusual thing for me. I had never, I'd never had like writer's block with my painting. I had always been able to just on demand pick up a brush and start making things happen. And I realized that I had come to some kind of a major crossroads. And so I spent about 6 months just trying to be open to whatever the universe wanted me to do next. And when I would try to pick up a paintbrush, it was just empty. There was just nothing there that I could work with. So in 1996, I was up on the north side, up in Evanston, and stopped in at a bookstore called Light of the Moon. And they had readers there. And I said, "Oh, I read tarot." And they said, "Well, how long I've been reading Thoreau. And I've been playing around with it since 1969, 1970. So, you know, they wanted me to do an audition, and I did an audition, and kind of everybody walked out of the room stunned, because I don't have the capacity to filter that well. And so I was telling people things about themselves or about people in their lives that were very private. And they were going, "Oh, how did you know that?" And it's like, well, duh. So anyway, that looped me in to Light of the Moon, and I started reading there. Eventually, I ended up reading there 3 days a week. And so I was a reader at Light of the Moon, and still looking for some kind of insight, some kind of understanding as to what the next step for me was. And I came across an author by the name of Alan Cohen, and he wrote a book called I Had It All the Time. And I was very curious about that idea. It's like, I'm looking for something, perhaps I already have it. So I started to question that as a result of reading his book. And in his book, there was occasional mention of A Course in Miracles. So I became even more intrigued with that, and picked up his second book called The Dragon Doesn't Live Here Anymore. And I read that book, and again, Course in Miracles came up. So I ordered a copy of the Course, and really for the first couple of years, I really felt like the definition of miracles was something that I had built an immunity toward, and I had to be able to redefine what a miracle was, which I don't think is an uncommon thing. I think we all come to the Course expecting to, you know, get rich or get laid or get this or get that. And but once we go through that initiation period where we discover that the miracle has absolutely nothing to do with physicality, that it's a much deeper process and a much more profound experience, that's when you really start to gain flight. So by 98, 99, 2000, I was working with the book quite a bit. And at that same time, I moved up to Wisconsin in the year 2000, and kind of expanded my avenues of activity, being a reader at a couple of different places. But it all came through that process of running out of steam. You know, when you get to a point in life where you just don't know where you're going to go next, and you finally are able to surrender to the idea that, you know, reveal thyself to me, Lord, because I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. So that was how I was initiated in the mystical adventures of A Course in Miracles.
That is really cool.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
What I didn't realize is that you were doing these readings at Evanston exactly when I was at Northwestern studying computer science, because I was at Northwestern from 95 to 2000. So right when you were just getting in, I didn't even know about the store that you did the readings in. I don't think I ever.
I never found that store either. Where was the store located, Chris? Do you remember?
It was on Dempster Avenue, about a block west of the old station.
Okay. Wow.
So, and in 1999, Ron sold that building, and I believe it was a Thai restaurant moved in there. They renovated the place and turned it into a restaurant. And
I've eaten there many times. It's an excellent Thai restaurant.
Interesting. And you didn't encounter A Course in Miracles once while you were there. How about that? But yeah, Light of the Moon became Infinite Light. We changed the name to it and moved it to the corner of Howard and Chicago Avenue. And that was when I would go in at I would arrive there at 10 in the morning, and there would be a line of 5 or 6 or 7 people waiting for me. And
Wow.
I would be reading nonstop all day until 6 p.m.
Wow.
And so 3 days a week, I was really, really in demand. It was kind of a fun experience for me because by sharing, it continued to enhance my understanding that there really is only one mind and one consciousness. And I could talk to people about their lives with confidence and offer them ideas that often really help them accelerate in their own ways, in their own growth. So it was a crash course in being enlightened to the degree that you're really beginning to be able to have communion with everybody you encounter.
Right. Get you back to that idea in the course that we teach what we need to learn.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I was experiencing this. Barret knows of this going on over the last couple of weeks. But there's a course student that I'm very close with, and in trying to help her through some stuff, I recognize there's just one of us here. We were both experiencing the same things kind of simultaneously, and we could have a conversation. I would open the course up, and there would be the same conversation going on in the reading. It was absolutely just miraculous how it went on for a couple weeks. Didn't matter what we were talking about. The answer was just immediate, and the recognition that we were both the students going through this together. It was just awesome, and that's what's going on for all of us at all times. Really recognize it.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I see in our conversation too, is like we're all threads in the tapestry. And if we're willing to really turn over our life, as you said earlier, to spirit and let ourselves basically be used as that vessel, the tapestry can be woven in the perfect way. And it might not look how we consciously think it should or want it to, but it might end up being even better than we could have ever planned. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And hopefully that is inspiration for people who do connect with this video is, if the course comes up for you randomly or periodically, don't resist it because something is trying to open up within you. And it's very important that you honor that rather than run from it.
Yeah. And I think another key thing in all of that too is don't be fearful. It is such like Barret was talking about when he first opened it and falling asleep, and time after time after time we meet students who were introduced to the course some time ago. And I had a dear friend of mine who showed up at one of my groups one time, and he had a copy of the course from 20 years ago, and I never knew he was involved in the course at all. And he said, I'm sure it's one of hundreds of thousands of copies around the world that have the first 68 pages highlighted, and then it gets stuck on a bookshelf, and it's just simply fear that has us stop. Our ego says, no, don't go there. But if we could be willing, as Jesus asked for right in the very beginning of the course, have a little bit of willingness, just a little bit, and be open to this, as kind of all of three of our stories talk about being open to it. This transformation can start to take place. This awakening, we start to wake up slowly but surely. We're recognizing that there's another way to see things than the way we always have, and it's in that enlightening, that enlightenment, that awareness just continues to grow, and life does become more and more beautiful when you see it differently.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it is. Well, then all of a sudden there's this cascade effect, and miracles, opportunities to experience miracles show up at an accelerated pace, and that's what makes it even more exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I think it was a biblical idea of letting the scales fall from our eyes, that we're walking around and we don't realize there are scales over our eyes. We just think that's kind of the normal way of being. But really what the scales are is there's some amount of guilt, there's some amount of fear, there's some amount of shame. And this healing, you know, through forgiveness is basically about letting the guilt and shame and fear go. And it means that our experience of this world becomes very different. We actually move into a place where we cannot be victimized by the things that happen here. And you know, it seems like a tall order, but it's actually achievable. And it's a worthy goal for all of us, because I mean, yeah, just think about it: living your whole life and never being like feeling like you've been wronged, or when that feeling comes up, you just let it go right away. You don't hold on to it. It's a very different way, I think, for almost all of us than we were raised to be. But it's a beautiful goal, because then we can step into that light that we are, and that light that I see shining over Chris's shoulder right now. So
Yes. I am perfectly strategically positioned to bring the light forth. Well, I think we had really an amazing connection today, and hopefully we'll get this episode out there and share it with as many people as possible. I'll do a little refinement on it and send you guys the link later in the day.
Awesome.
Right.
Thank you.
And thank you both, Charlie and Barret. Thank you for showing up and having this dialogue about how we came into A Course in Miracles.
Yeah,
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Barret.
Yeah, very blessed, very blessed. You guys have a beautiful rest of your day.
All right.
Talk to you soon.
You too.
Thank you.
Blessings, everyone.